Good evening, everybody.
Hello, Ken.
Good to see everyone. I want to welcome everyone to episode 607. For some reason, it says we have no views. I don't understand that. Have the Lost 10 Tribes been erased from history, part 2? And this week we have Jason and Stan. And as always, Dr. Ricks, if you would start us out, that would be wonderful. Oh, there we go. Now we got some viewers.
I just wanted to, I just love Ronald Reagan jokes. I'm going to go back to one of his standard jokes just to make a point here. He was driving on the freeway and he saw this chicken, 45 miles an hour. He speeds up, the chicken speeds up even more. He said, did that chicken have 3 legs? The chicken pulls ahead of him, goes down this country road. So he pulls down the country road and he says to the farmer, Did you see a 3-legged chicken go by? Yes, we breed them here, the farmer said. Why? He says, well, I like the drumsticks, Ma likes the drumsticks, and Junior likes the drumstick. So we bred a 3-legged chicken. Well, how do they taste? I don't know. We haven't caught one yet. Now, this story is a golfer's at he's at the main tee, and he slices the ball, which is very easy to do, and it spins off, goes over the fence, outside the golf course, into a chicken ranch, boom, and hits a chicken in the head and kills it instantly. The man was upset. So after his 18 holes, he had to do his thing. He came over to the farm and said, sorry, sir, my terrible tee shot hit one of your chickens and knocked him dead in the head. He says, can I replace the hen? The farmer said to him, well, I don't think so. He says, why not? How many eggs can you lay per day?
I asked Dolores the other day, how many hens we got? He said, we got 37 hens. I said, what do we need 37 hens for?
You all must have eggs coming out the wazoo, right?
Right now, yeah, we're getting 2 dozen, 2.5 dozen or more a day, but we're selling them. She sells them. Yeah.
Well, fresh eggs are actually from real people. It's a real good, big deal. Well, one more Reagan joke. Reagan was in this big auditorium, and by the way, politics were nicer than they are today, with all these meetings. Anyway, but the people look worried that he was going to have a long, boring speech. So he said to them, don't worry, I'm going to be like Henry VIII. You know what he said to each of his 6 wives? I won't keep you long. So you can blame Reagan for those jokes. The Gipper put those out, mostly. Okay, or my version of telling it. Okay, the Lost 10 Tribes, part 2. By the way, I want to see if you agree with me. I think because I hear these people on Christian radio and other places all the time, and when they talk about the Old Testament or Israel, they assume all Israel is totally synonymous with Jewish.
That's the modern misunderstanding, because most people actually make those statements all the time, even in the news, general public, people you meet on the street. They think when you say something about Israel, it's talking about the nation of Israel, but the Bible certainly is not referring to that nation of Israel over there we have today. because you have to ask the question, who is Israel? Where did the name originate? And y'all probably covered that in the first program of where the name Israel came from.
I think Ken said it. I watched last week, and Ken said a statement, and I thought, man, that really hit the nail on the head when you said most people think Israel as a place and Judah as a people. I thought that was very well said. You know, they don't think of it as what we're going to go into talking about.
Yeah. I think it's, if you have only a cursory knowledge of the Bible, you don't understand that Judah is just a small, let's say a lesser part of Israel. The biggest chunk of Israel, the lost 10 tribes, are separate. One man on the radio this morning, was yesterday, he said, Abraham, the world's first Jew. You know, that actually is not, that shows Bible ignorance.
Yeah. The most, a lot of the mention of the name Israel in the Bible has nothing to do with the nation of Israel we have over there, you see over there today.
Right.
When people read that word Israel in the Bible, they think about this little bitty nation over there, and you will be surprised who Israel truly is.
And I would argue you won't really understand much of the Bible, New and Old Testament, especially the Old, if you don't recognize that Israel split into two chunks, a northern 10 kingdom and a southern, ended up being 3 kingdom because Levi went with Judah. And I think Benjamin was there with them too. So you have the northern 10, the southern 3, and most of the history of Israel, in the book of Kings and Chronicles is about those 2 kingdoms.
Yes, 2 separate dynasty of kings, 2 separate lineages, and for I guess you would say hundreds of years this went by, where 2 separate nations existed bordering one another, even though they were sort of brother nations. But there were a lot of times they had conflicts between one another. Sometimes they agreed with one another, but there was a bitter feud that caused them to divide.
Ken, would you read 1 Kings 11:30 for us?
And Ahijah caught the new garment and rent it in 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take 10 pieces, or take the pieces. Take the 10 pieces, for thus said the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee.
So the man was told, when he was just a major leader, I think he led many of the building projects, made him a good leader. He was just a leader, and all of a sudden the prophet said, hey, you're going to be king over 10 tribes.
Yeah, the verse 28 prior to that, it says, because I was reading this, and it said, he was a mighty man of valor and was industrious man of the officers. But whenever we read about Jeroboam, son of Nebat, it's not with very good report. They went in the way of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And so he totally embraced, Baal when they separated. But it's this prophecy. Well, this what this guy's telling him here. I wonder if he actually considered what was being given to him, because it talks about because he's gonna take care of Judah because of David, but because everybody's not listened to him, and apparently he walked them right into that. I don't know how the mind workings of Jeroboam was, but I read this where it says he had this. It says he clothed himself with a new garment. I don't know, and y'all help me out, but does it kind of sound like he's somebody who was being somebody as he was walking around, or sounds like that to me? He had the right attitude to be taking this kingdom in that direction, I guess.
Yeah, one of the things too is why did he get the kingdom? We know that David was, a man after God's own heart, and then along came his son Solomon, who inherited the kingdom, who actually was the one that built the temple and brought the ark into the temple. One thing that David always wanted to do, was never able to do. God said his son was going to do that. But we know that Solomon had 700 wives and about 300 concubines. I don't know how the man did that, but he did. And God told him that they would drive, that they would he would marry these women from all over the nation and all over the surrounding countries, and they led him away from God. Actually, it's what it actually says. And because he didn't obey God's voice, and because he didn't uh, remember God, and he was led astray, God said, "I'm going to rend the kingdom out of your hand." And and you're right, Jason. He said, "I'm going to leave one tribe for David's sake, because of the promise I made to him." And that's why he lost the kingdom, and that's why it became divided.
By the way,
I was just going to say one more thing. It was a good lesson that Jeroboam should have listened to, as to why, because he was going to face the same sort of obstacle in the future.
Ken, would you read verse 34, please?
Howbeit I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince of all the days of his life, for David my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statute.
Yeah. God loved David. Of course, David loved God, and God loved David. In other words, he didn't totally take the kingdom away from David, because he had promised, like we talked about last week. Anyway, we'll talk about that more. He made great promises to David, and that's a good deal. He loved David so much. And but the point is, there are two kingdoms, too. And most people, if you read the Old Testament carefully, you will see that there are two of them. And I was just thinking about what you said, Jason, about what kind of man was Jeroboam. Since he was the chief builder, and he was in charge of, I guess, hundreds of thousands of workers, or whatever the number was. It's a large number, and big, expensive projects. I assume he was a good manager and a big wheel, and a man who could handle responsibility, and that's why God chose him. But that also may be why he was a threat to Solomon. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Well, I think that when somebody comes to God, comes to Christ, we have to come with a very humbled attitude. I gave some thought, and I was thinking about this, because if you continue reading, it says, "And to his son I will give one tribe." And as we mentioned earlier, actually it was Benjamin, and I thought it was part of Manasseh, but you said Levi went there. I couldn't remember, but it was actually more than that. But he only says one, and obviously because of David. David was of the tribe of Judah, so that southern. But it mentions right here one, and an interesting thought that I thought about, because as I don't want to jump ahead, but I mean, we're going to get to where it talks about how he divorces Israel. But we take a look at the difference between Israel and Judah, and Judah didn't have as an A report either. I mean, you'd sit here and you get a bad king, a bad king, a bad king, a not so bad king, but they always failed to get rid of all the high places, and they lacked. But I got to thinking about the promise that was given to Abraham, and I think it goes right along with the relationship he had with David. But and somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there had to remain somebody he was attached to, because he was not going to come through. Christ was not going to come through the Edomites, the Moabites, or for that matter, Israel, whom he had divorced. He had to come back through somebody he was still attached to. I mean, that's just a thought,
Makes sense. God brought Judah back from captivity and kept them in a reasonably good position, because Rome didn't mess with them that much. They ran their own house for the most part. They're in a good place when Christ came back, and God allowed it. By the way, we could read 2 Kings 16:7, but we probably don't need to. All it basically says is that Israel is at war with Judah. But we already kind of know that. So, that they were two separate kingdoms. But anybody who wants to read 2 Kings 16 carefully, you'll see that Judah is at war with Israel. So it's proving there are two separate kingdoms.
You mean after I figured out how to say Tiglath-Pileser that I don't get to use that? Or did you think you were saving me on that one?
And it's one word. Isn't it amazing? When you see that, you think, how can that be one word?
But you know what? It's hyphenated everywhere you look for it. Tiglath-Pileser. It's hyphenated everywhere.
But it's translated as one name.
Yep.
One man's name. Well, not his last name, surname. Anyway, it's probably
Pileser / Tiglath. Last name first.
And just as you were saying, Jason, well, probably we should build up to it. But Israel had some repentance and some good kings. I mean, Judah. But Israel never did because of Jeroboam. Mm-hmm. And I just want to throw this date out here. The lost 10 tribes went into captivity at 722 BC. Judah lasted until 586 BC. Well, over about a century and a half longer, because they had kings and they repented. Where what Jeroboam did screwed them up. And we're going to talk about what Jeroboam did to screw them up. He lost the sign of the true God. And why don't we go into that part of it? Why did the 10 tribes of Israel lose their identity? Because the Jews, even when they were scattered for many, many centuries all over the world, they still knew who they were and had their mathematical formulas, how to do the count and everything. So when they got back together, they were still in step. Isn't that amazing? By the way, do you know that I think Judah in the Middle East today, or Israel today, is probably the only country that has the same language they had about 3,300 years ago. They lost it and then went back to it. Can you think of any language that has, in the world history, that's true of?
That is incredibly interesting, isn't it? I was reading something about the first mention of the Israelites was all the way back in about the 1300 BC in ancient Egypt. That the name Israel is actually mentioned on a stele. It's some sort of a Menareth stele or something like that. I can't remember the exact term, but their heritage goes all the way back. And unlike the northern tribes that were carried away captive by the Assyrians, and of course we know that happened in 3 successive ways of Sennacherib, who was at Sargon and Shalmaneser, I guess. They were carried away captive and they left and they never returned to the land of Judah or Palestine there. But the southern tribe of Judah, when they were carried away to Babylon, they returned. And a lot of the scholars believe that they were carried away because of their idolatry, but they were cured of that when they came back. They remained loyal to God. I mean, they had their ups and downs, but they still remained somewhat faithful to God down through history, and as they still are today in a lot of the people in that nation.
There's a couple places in the Bible, and I didn't look this up before I came here, where the tribes are named, but one name is left out. There's one in the, I think, Old Testament, one of the names is left, and then one in Revelation, I think, one of the tribes is left out. Dan.
2 are left out.
Two were left. Yeah, 2 was it 2? Yeah,
Ephraim.
I find that interesting.
Ephraim and Dan.
Yeah, I find that interesting.
Well, Ephraim is referred to as the tribe of Joseph.
Joseph, yeah.
So they'll say Joseph and Manasseh, and then of course Dan is left out in the book of Revelation. And there's some speculation as to why. If Dan truly is the nation of Ireland, that's about 90% Roman Catholic, that may be some of the reason why they're left out. But that's a debatable topic, I guess.
There's one commentator that says they were under, because they were small at that time, and they were kind of under one of the other tribes, and I'd have to look it up. That's another theory, but we don't really know. But I would tell people not to worry about it. Whatever God is up to, we'll figure out why Dan is left out in Revelation. If they were included in that other tribe because of their small numbers, but we'll find out. It's going to be interesting. There are some things to learn. One of the things we want to just say real quickly, if you look at Exodus 31:13, the Sabbaths, and that includes annual Sabbaths and weekly Sabbath, are a sign of who is your God. And that's the big mistake that Jeroboam put on the northern 10. Kim, would you read 1 Kings 12:26-27, please?
1 Kings? Okay.
1 Kings 12:26.
We're skipping Jeremiah, I guess.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, did we? Oh, that's right. You read Jeremiah 3:8. I'm sorry. I'm
right.
sorry about that. I forgot that one.
Just making sure I haven't lost it again. Then I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but went and played the harlot also.
Yeah, that also shows you they're two separate tribes, and eventually God wasn't happy with either one of them. He divorced both of them.
Yep.
Eventually, for a while at least. Now, would you read 1 Kings 12:26? Because there's a lot here that we need to talk about why they lost their identity.
And Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom may return up to the house of David, but if these people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then the heart of this people will turn back to their Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and go back to Rehoboam, king of Judah.
Actually, I think I understand that. Let's assume that Jeroboam was selfish, worldly, and insecure in a certain kind of way, or didn't fully trust God. Wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah, or they could be like the political powers today that are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah,
they're trying to control the people for the money.
Exactly.
That's always the way, isn't it?
Because look at it from his point of view. If they do the pilgrimage, some of them did it 3 times a year, and they took a tenth of their income and they spent it in Jerusalem with whatever they did there on the 3 holy days, or at least the big one. He said, well, maybe when they're in Jerusalem and with the temple, they realize this is the real heart of Israel, and we should come back to David's kingdom. That reunite fear, but the bigger one is money. Can you see where they're losing all that money?
That's an interesting thought, though. He was probably right. Can you imagine if he'd allowed them to go back to Jerusalem? They probably would have returned eventually to David and to to God's way of life. I mean, that's an interesting thought, to think that one man prevented them from actually repenting at some point in the future. They had a change of heart. Maybe they lost their their heartfelt pride that they had once had in Israel, and they would have remembered that over the course of 20 years or so, and maybe they would have wanted to go back. And it's really sad that one person could lead a nation away from God when their true heart and feelings would have led them right back into the arms of David's lineage down there in Jerusalem.
And would you read 1 Kings 12:31, please, Ken?
And he made an house of high places and made priests of the lowest of the people. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. So did he in Bethel, sacrificing unto the calves that he had made, and placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, the month he had devised of his own heart.
I was going to ask y'all a question because I was looking at that, and I'm reading this book right now. It's called The Spirit of the Antichrist, and it's talking about how paganism, how it goes through different, and people take it and they adopt it and then they make it their own. And we understand that they went into Baal worship, and today a lot of the stuff that's trickled down is what most people think is Christianity, and it's a
Mhm.
lot of those practices that came from that. But when I was looking at this, I didn't really think about it, and I looked at a calendar after we keep the Feast of Tabernacles. But there's something today, and I'm wondering if it just trickled down from this, which is called All Saints Day, which most people don't even do that, but they keep Halloween, which is the day prior to that. And I'm just wondering if maybe this was part of that's inception. I don't know.
They
Have
added
y'all?
All Saints Day after the fact, I think, after Halloween
Mhm.
to distract from Halloween, to kind of set it up.
I didn't know if it was something that originated from something. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of stuff in paganism that it was this and then it kind of became this. People
Mhm.
like to take it and make it their own and
Mhm.
do all kinds of stuff with it.
Well,
By the way,
you have to
Jason, you're
go
onto
ahead.
something. It could be that Oktoberfest is a remnant of a 1 month late Feast of Tabernacles, Oktoberfest. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Stan. Go ahead.
Well, if you go back and read what Jeroboam set up there, not only did he set up these golden calves, but he also set up in Bethel, which was where Jacob had the pillar stone that he set up and anointed with oil. It was also where he laid his head on the stone before he had when he had this dream of Jacob's ladder of the angels descending and descending. So thus the name Bethel means house of God. So he picked a spot that was of the history and the heritage of Israel. They all knew the name of that city, but then he coupled with it these pagan idols that came out of Egypt, and he established Ashtaroth, which is maybe a precursor to Easter, some believe, and he actually went back and reestablished the worship of Baal and even human sacrifice. It's hard to believe that, but so he took something that was of their heritage and he mingled it with something that was utterly pagan. And the point I wanted to make is, do Christians do that today? Have they done that today? And if they have, is it okay? A lot of people say, well, I don't worship it that way. I don't worship Easter or Halloween or Christmas that way. I observe it. But in Jeroboam's day, he did exactly the same thing, and it wasn't pleasing to God at all. And it led I guess the biggest point, and I believe we're trying to make here tonight, is it led the northern 10 tribes of Israel farther away from God instead of bringing them closer.
Well, obviously it's not unlike what the Constantine did, of course, and what the modern Catholic
Mhm.
Church
Mhm.
keep. But I think the key to this whole thing is the end of that last sentence is he had devised of his own heart. He made
Mhm.
it up. He made up
Yeah.
all this stuff, just like they made up Christmas and Easter and
Well, Constantine, like you said, he created these observances, but they also eliminated any reference to Jewishness. That
yes.
was their big thing. They wanted to get rid of the Sabbath day because it reeked of Jewishness. And the holy days, same thing, same statement. And so Jeroboam almost did the same thing in the same spirit. He wanted to get away from anything that had to do with the Jews down there in the southern tribe of Judah, and not remind them that it was the seventh month, because that of course leads them to all the holy days and the Sabbath day. And that's exactly what he did, and that's exactly what they did in Constantine's day. And look at the results of what happened to his decision. The Protestants still reject the Sabbath day and holy days today. So is that a same spirit, a same power that's devising and guiding that process? It makes you wonder.
Well, I was going to say
That's
just that.
exact. It's
Who do you
exactly
think?
that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
I would say
Jason.
it's exactly that because no, because you said it's is this the spirit of that. It's because You talk to people, you said it exactly, Stan. They go, well, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not worshiping that way. But they're basically
Mhm.
saying, devising of their own heart, I worship God the way that I worship God, that I
Mhm.
choose to worship God. And I think that's why he said the blood of bulls and goats. It's not that. It's about obedience. And the reason it's about obedience is because God has designated certain observances that tell a story. They have a meaning, they have a purpose behind them. It all spells out his plan. And mankind, even if he doesn't understand it, is better off obeying, knowing knowing what you're supposed to do is the beginning stages. But as we do it, he opens our mind to this greater truth that he gives through the Holy Spirit, and we begin to understand and we can see his plan. It's
Think about the
amazing.
logic. Think about the logic that Jeroboam used. He says, it's too far going all the
Yeah.
way down there. We'll make it more convenient. And then he also said, behold, these calves, probably were young bulls, but anyway, these calves are the God that led us out of Egypt.
Yeah.
So he was blending the truth with things that he made up himself.
Mhm.
And I call it a counterfeit religion. It had maybe a little truth in it that they were led by God out of Egypt, but he blended it with all these things that he came up with.
I'd say
Unbelievable.
that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just going to say, and the people bit. I mean, they swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. They didn't think for themselves and think this is wrong. I mean, if you think about their heritage, where they were when they were a part of the 12 tribes of Israel in one nation under David, they were all keeping the Sabbath day. They were all keeping the holy days. They were all observing everything that God had commanded them, all of his laws. And now they're separated and up in the northern tribes. And along comes a politician, a builder. He was obviously a very dynamic man, able to lead, able to convince people. And he just one day out blurts out, you don't have to go keep the feast in the 7th month. You can do it in the 8th month. Where was the resistance there? Where were the people that should have stood up for the truth at that moment?
One of the, in a diabolical sense, one of the smart things he did was he created his own priesthood out of the lowest of people, the lowest of the people, meaning these people didn't really know anything.
Right.
I'm giving you being a priest was a good job in that world in those days.
Mhm.
I'm giving you this good job as a priest. You teach what I tell you to teach.
You
You
know,
pay them, and then they have to do what you tell them to do.
the way you said that, Stan, isn't that pretty much the way worldwide went through the same thing? Every so now and then there's a reset into the truth, and then it gets drug back into paganism at some point. Someone
to
comes
the nth
along.
degree, yeah. Well, I mean, anytime a preacher gets up that has kept the Sabbath day for decades after decade after decade, and then all of a sudden a preacher gets up and says, "You don't have to do that. You can keep Sunday. It's perfectly fine." I mean, there should have been everybody should have got up and walked out of that
Yes.
service that day, and whenever that was done, or however that might have been done. But it's not the first time in history that that's happened.
No,
That
no.
there's been a wholesale, rebellion against God, and of course we see it here, the roots of it here in ancient Israel. And I have to say this: the people may have wanted it that way. They had gotten to the point where God called them a rebellious, stiff-necked, hard-hearted, you know, people. And so they got to the point that they may have wanted somebody to get up and say, you don't have to do that. You can just celebrate the way you want to. You can go when you want to, and take it easy. It's not that there's not that hard. And they bought it, and they should have
That,
resisted.
yes,
And they,
it's like there's nothing new under the sun. And like what you're saying, I don't think it's like you said, when one person gets up and says, okay, we're going to change. He's probably been talking to others who had some kind of, status, and then they send feelers out. And like you're saying,
yeah.
there's people out there they already see that they're willing to bite, and they already
Mhm.
see the attitude. And so when it is officially announced, then it's like, well, okay, the propaganda machine worked. We got who we needed.
And he got them away from the true teachers because, written Bibles were rare. So the only ones who knew a lot of Bible principles and laws and regulations were the Levite priests, because they were supposed to be trained in it. So in effect, he fired the Levites. We don't need you. I got my own priests.
Mhm.
So what the Levites, even though they were scattered among all 13 tribes, they all migrated back to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That's why Levi is with Judah, because in effect, and I think a lot of Levites said, I'm not staying in this paganized, compromised
Mhm.
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah.
Good for them. Good for them.
Compromise. And
I'm
that's
glad
why they all went to Judah.
I'm glad they had the courage to do that, because it would have been easy to just slide along with the rest of the group. In that too, I think it's a little bit of a lesson too for even modern Christianity, is that, it's getting so hard to go to the feast, or it's getting so hard to go to the Sabbath service every week. And I'm not talking about people that are elderly and have trouble traveling. I'm talking people that are perfectly capable of going and making the decision to go to the Feast of Tabernacles or the holy days that God has throughout the year. And it just becomes too, boring, too tiring, too whatever excuse you have. What it led to for the nation of Israel, the northern tribes, I mean, they drifted farther and farther and farther away from God until, like you said, Dr. Ricks, and the whole point of this thing, they lost their identity. And that's rather sad.
I might
That's
add one more point. When Jezebel came along, and Ahab was at least weak in respect to her, that she took them to a new level. They had a bad counterfeit religion, and then she took them lower, deep into Baal worship. I'm not putting all the blame on her, but you get the general idea. They went from counterfeit bad to really bad,
Yeah.
and that's why they got booted out of the Holy Land a lot sooner. And I believe they had lost their identity when they spent a little time with the Assyrians and other nations they probably were sold as labor gangs and that's that sort of thing.
It's easy to once you dip your feet into paganism, is to go all in. Once you get acclimated, and it's easier and easier to go all in. And I think that's the mistake that we make, or that people make in society throughout the generations. It just gets easy.
And if you have good teachers like Levites were, relatively speaking, hold on to good teachers. You need them.
Yes.
Who aren't bribed by money. Like I'm assuming like Stan and Ken, you all are not bribed by money, right?
Cookies, maybe. Money, no.
Something that you said earlier about people being drawn away, like, coming away from the feast. I can remember one of the big things whenever Brenda and I were, first got married and we started having our kids. One thing that people, not people in the religion, but people outside they said, "Oh, you can't go do that now that you have kids. You can't take your kids out of school and go out of town for 2 weeks." And we said, "Yes, you can." and they said, "Well, your kids are going to suffer in school," and it was a whole lot. So I got that a lot from my family, but I was like, my kids made A's, never had a problem one, but they will, people will try to tell you that, oh no, you can't do that. And you can, because we have a God that prescribed it. And he would not tell us to do something that's we can't do.
In a lot of cases, the children learned a lot more on some of the trips that we took over the years that they would have never learned in a classroom. Experience, travel, different states, got to see new scenery, places most kids would never get to see as a result of our ability to travel to different feast groups all over the country. And we're able to travel and have all those great memories and broaden their horizons that they would never done out of a textbook.
Yeah.
That's what we set to do here, really, is to go through the Bible, take out all the stuff the world has added and changed and misinterpreted, and get it back to the bare bones of what it actually says.
By the way, there's one more sign of where the lost 10 tribes are. And this is God's covenant with King David. Um, I'm just going to make it real brief. David said to God, I want to build you a house because he loved God so much. God said, you're not the one to build it, but because you want to build me a house, I, God, will build you, David, a house. Your dynasty will last forever. I might punish it now and then, but I won't end it like I did Saul's dynasty. You know, that is an amazing story.
Mhm. And he reiterated that promise to Solomon, his son, and then eventually to Rehoboam, David's grandson. And it went right on down their lineage, just like he said, that comes from your body. In other words, your children, you're going to always be blessed by this promise, this covenant that I'm making with you.
And when you read certain scriptures in the Old Testament, every now and then God will get mad at some king. He'll send a prophet. The prophet will say something like, if it weren't for your King David, who was your great, 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 great grandfather, I'd get rid of you altogether. But because you're David's whatever, great, great, great grandson, I'm going to. And it's kind of amazing when you read that.
You know, God remembered his promises to David, even down through the most terrible times of the nation of Judah. That is incredible that God held on to that promise. And that's an example of how God will hold on to the promises that he makes to each of us as well.
Would you read 2 Samuel 7:12, please, Ken?
When your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, and who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever.
By the way, I forgot to mention, I'm sure Jason wouldn't sell out for a paycheck either. I forgot to mention Jason. But that's an interesting scripture, though. Establish his dynasty forever. Interesting thought, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we can skip verse 15 if you don't mind. It's basically saying the same thing with a few more details into it. And David appreciated that God did this for him. And I think it's interesting. Could you read 2 Samuel 7:18, please, Ken?
Then King David went in and sat before the Lord, and he said, Who am I, O Lord God? What is my house that you have brought me this far?
You realize David was a national hero. When he defeated Goliath, he immediately became a national hero, but he was still humble. Most young men, probably 18 or 19, national hero gone right to their head. But David seemed to keep his head in spite of being a national hero.
That was he was always after God's own heart, and that's what we were talking about the house that he wanted to build for God, and God wouldn't let him do it because of the blood that was on his hand. He had done some pretty amazing things, the whole story with Bathsheba and everything, but he always returned to God with a repentant heart. And that was the key for him, I believe. That was God knew, he was the way that his heart was, the way he looked towards his creator.
By the way, I have a theory on, apart from what you just said, in addition to it, David's role in Israel was to be a warrior, not just from Goliath, but when you read the whole story, he conquered all the nations all the way around Israel, from Egypt all up to what we now call Iraq, and basically won a lot of wars, killed a lot of people. Apparently, David was quite the warrior. Mm-hmm. And had a great warrior reputation, etc. So that's a bloody kind of thing. And God wanted the man who built the house of prayer to be a peacemaker and not a warrior. But I don't think he's blaming David for being a warrior. That's the role God called him to fulfill. And I also think that's one reason God didn't want Moses to go into the promised land. There may be other reasons. But Joshua basically was a warrior. He was eliminating 7 nations in Canaan. And I don't think that was the role that God wanted Moses to fulfill. He wanted Moses to be the law giver. You see, it
Oh, we lost your
setting
audio.
Moses free
There
from
we
messing
go.
with the Israelites probably was a blessing in disguise, right?
Yes.
Did I freeze up?
No, but your audio went blank. I don't know why.
Saying too much.
Well, you just spurred a thought in my mind too. You know what would later become the Messiah, who came through the nation of Judah, which was Jesus Christ, and we know that he's. It's interesting that you mentioned those different characteristics of Moses and Joshua and David. You know, he's called the son of Jesse. Jesus, the Bible refers to him as the son of Jesse, the son of David. He's called the son of the lineage of David's house. And, Moses was a type of Christ. He was like the rescuer, the salvation of the Israelites in the land of Egypt. And I guess what I'm trying to say is Jesus sort of encompasses all of these characteristics as savior, peacemaker, but also warrior, as you mentioned, Dr. Ricks. There's coming a time when he's going to go out and destroy the enemy and rescue his people, whoever they are, whether they're Israelites or not, but certainly spiritual Israel. And so he is going to embody all of those characteristics of these different men, both priest and prophet. So, as Paul actually says, maybe he was exemplifying a little bit of his characteristics with each of these great leaders.
That's a good point. Kim, would you read that next scripture that goes with it? And then I mentioned it. Which one goes with it? Verse 29 of 2 Samuel 7.
Now, therefore, let it please you to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever before you. For you, O Lord God, have spoken it, and with your blessing let the house of your servant be blessed forever.
So let's look for a monarchy that could be the house of David in the modern world. And if you look at history of the last few centuries, the only consequential monarchy in the world is in London. I remember this one professor was telling a story about how he led trips to go to Liberty Hall and all those things about the Continental Congress and American Independence on America's 200th anniversary. But Queen Elizabeth came there too. For whatever reason, I don't know. She was across the street. He said nobody wanted to go to Independence Hall. It was empty. They all wanted to go see Queen Elizabeth. In other words, the British monarchy is still a big deal even in America.
Look at the royal weddings. I mean, the whole world can't get enough of the royal weddings. Every time one of them comes around, or even the funeral. I mean, look at the death of Queen Elizabeth, who'd reigned 50 something years, I guess, and it's remarkable at the way the world turns their attention to that royal family. And there's a sense of, I guess, maybe destiny, if you want to call it that, a sense of romanticism about it. Every child wants to be a princess, or a little girl. All of them want to be little princes, and they still to this day dress up like that, and it makes you wonder if there's something very moving and striking and historical about that fact.
It's a little more tarnished as of late than it has been
Yep.
in the past.
Yep.
And there's actually calls
still,
for the end of the monarchy right now in England. That's just what's going on over there.
But it won't end because
no, of course not.
They're troublemaker. By the way, even in the 1930s, the king had married an American divorcee. The British people went crazy.
Yeah.
That wasn't the end of the monarchy, though, but that's another story. By the way, if you look at recent history, most of this happened during and after World War I. All the royal houses of Europe, which still weren't as significant as the British throne, went down. The Tsar went down. I'm trying to remember them all. The Kaiser went down. the King of Austria went down, the Netherlands, Italy came after World War One, but it kind of an after effect of it. Um, they all went down, and
Ottoman Empire, yeah.
the only one that got more significant for some odd reason, historians say during the 20s and 30s, the royal house in London became even more significant and famous. And here's something that most people don't know. When Chamberlain was muffing World War II and everything was going bad, the British Parliament said, we got to get rid of the prime minister. But because they're in the middle of a war and it was a crisis, it was going very badly, there was no place to have a big, long election. So they went to the king, and I think they had two candidates. Churchill, I forgot the other guy's name. Anyway, it'll come to me later. But he was the foreign minister with a lot of fame. You know who chose the one that won World War II? It was the King of England.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're going to say, well, that wasn't such a hard choice. Churchill was the one that had been warning them about Hitler in the newspaper for years. So
Yeah.
in one way, it was the obvious choice, but there were people who didn't like Churchill. I call it, like you have Trump derangement syndrome. There was Churchill derangement syndrome among liberals. They never liked him. And maybe you could go back, he made some mistakes, but I still see the similarity. In spite of all that, the king made a good choice. And people don't realize the King of England. Now, didn't they remove a prime minister of Australia about 20 years ago? I think might have been Queen Elizabeth, but who was on the throne then?
Very possible. I can't remember that. I can't remember who it was. I wanted to make a point, though, since we're on this subject of Israel and the lost 10 tribes of Israel and who the identity of Israel is today and who most people think Israel is. Most people think when they hear the name Israel, they think of, as we've said, the little country over in the Middle East, the nation of Israel. But I wanted to remind everybody back in Jacob's day, you remember who Jacob was. God, I mentioned the origination of the name Israel came from God, who, when Jacob was there and he wrestled with God, most people know that story. He saw Jacob's, there was an occasion where he wrestled with God and he prevailed. And God said, your name will be no more called Jacob, but Israel, because you prevailed with God. Jacob went on to have all of his 12 sons, as we know, the 12 tribes of Israel. And then he had Joseph, who was sold into Egypt. And when Jacob, later on, to make a long story short, was reunited with Joseph, he blessed Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And he actually said, let my name, which his name was Israel, be named on them, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, you can make the point that the Bible talks a lot about all 12 tribes as being called collectively the nation of Israel. And you could make the point that even when they were divided, that the northern tribes were called Israel. But the name that God gave to the tribes Ephraim and Manasseh was Israel. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, if that's true, if you could identify who Ephraim and Manasseh was, and of course we know that the promises that came to Abraham was that there would be a company of nations and one great nation, but they would be brother nations, as I think you can identify today. If that's the case, then those two nations are what God calls Israel today. And so when you go back and read some of these prophecies that have to do with the nation of Israel, it could very well be talking about the nation in which you live today.
I wondered
and that
about
is
that.
astounding. Are these prophecies that people think are going to be bestowed upon that little nation over there in the Middle East, or are these prophecies directed at the United States and Great Britain today? And if that's the case, then you have to wash away all of your ideas about prophecy and have them focus on the nation of the United States and Britain, and rethink how these prophecies are going to be laid out and who they're really talking about.
Two things. By the way, we were in England, and I think it was 94. My wife and I, we saw in Westminster an old throne that all the British kings had been crowned on. And underneath the throne was a rock with a big chain on it. And they said that was Jacob's pillar stone. Now, maybe it isn't, maybe it is, but that same old wooden throne, that's where King Charles, was it last year or year before last? Because we watched it on TV, was crowned King of England. So one way to look at it, when Judah was falling apart and going into captivity, uh, if God wanted to save the royal seed and house, wouldn't it be logical to take it where Ephraim, the lost 10 tribes were, and house it there? And that book behind me gives details of what we think happened. And there's people in Britain called the British Islam theory. They believe it too, and they have their own history how it started in Ireland and then Scotland and then to London, and that's how it got there. But at least it's a good indication of where the lost 10 tribes are, because God put the throne there. And I believe it's the only throne in the world that's that significant.
I want to interject a thought there, Dr. Ricks, too. A lot of people will say, well, all those tribes, they were lost in history and they disappeared forever. But when Jesus came along in his day, he said the lady came to him and, she was antagonizing and wanting him to listen to her, and he just ignored her. And he said, I am not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And before that, in Matthew, I think it's Matthew the 5th or 6th, 7th chapter, 10th chapter, I think chapter 10, he says, Go you not to the Gentiles, but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. 2 times he makes a reference to the house of Israel, who people thought were lost in history from 721 BC. This is 750 years later. Jesus is still saying that they're out there somewhere and you're to go preach to them. They're lost, they're confused, they're still blinded, and I believe the vast majority of them are still blinded today, but at least the identity of who they are is out there. And we could make the point that our responsibility is not only to the Gentiles but to those people who don't even know who they are.
I'm going to jump to prophecy for a minute. We may discuss this more, but if Britain and America are the lost 10 tribes of Israel, if America and Britain fall from power, that vacuum is going to be occupied by evil world powers, and we're going to move toward the Holy Roman Empire and an evil empire in evil days. I think the importance of keeping America, Britain, and Canada strong, we should pray for it. I'm not saying America, Britain, and Canada are perfect, of course not, but I still think it's the greatest force for holding back real evil. People go, oh yeah, I don't like the way the administration does this and that. Yeah, that's true, the things you might not like, but you don't know what real oppression is. If you go to a place like communist China, or what the Nazis had in the 1930s and 40s, something like that is coming back again.
As Isaiah the 11th chapter talks about that he's going to recover the remnant of the house of Israel and the house of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. And he talks about those nations being scattered. So if you believe that Israel is referring to that little tiny nation of Israel today, then you sit back over here on your heels in the United States or wherever you live, and you say, oh, that prophecy is about them. They're going to be destroyed. And yes, they may very well have their own day of reckoning or a day of trouble, as the Bible describes. But if it's talking about the house of Israel and the house of Judah, and Israel could be identified as, the modern nation of the United States and Britain, then that means they're going to be affected by a great time of Jacob's troubles, it's called in Jeremiah. And is God going to rescue them from the 4 corners of the earth as a result of a downfall or a eventual carrying away because of the same reason that happened in Jeroboam's day, because of their rebellion, their turning away from God, and the resistance to his Sabbaths and his holy days and his commandments? I guess it remains to be seen, but certainly something one ought to consider and look into.
Yes.
Father Kim, would you read our last scripture, Luke 1:30?
The angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, and behold, you will conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus. He will be great. He will be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end."
And you could make the argument, how can you give him a throne that hasn't existed for 15, 16 centuries? It's more likely if you're going to give him a throne, it's one that will exist at the end time, and then he just takes it over.
Yeah, I think it's Isaiah the 6th chapter that says, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders." And it also speaks of, that he will inherit the throne of his father David, and he'll reign forever at that point. So I guess the good news from all of this is that he is coming back and he's going to inherit that throne, which we believe still remains to this day, because God's Davidic covenant that he made with David was that there would never fail a man to sit upon a throne of his lineage. And that included the final one, who is, the Bible says, whose right it is to actually sit upon that throne, the scepter that possesses the scepter, and he will reign over the kingdoms of the earth. You can go read in Daniel or in Micah, many scriptures there that talk about the government and how he's going to reunite the kingdom of Israel and Judah and be one staff or one stick in his hand. Some good news about with that. We win in the end, I guess you want to say that.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, Kim, would you play our music?
All right.
For once, I don't have any big ideas. I know that Iran is the big crisis coming up in the near future. And from what I heard, the Islamic countries in that area have outlawed America from using their airspace. They like a weakened Iran, but they don't want a open worldly Western government in Iran, because they're going to have freedom of religion, and they don't want freedom of religion in their part of the world.
No.
They're all Islamic, I call them religious dictatorships of one sort or another. So, and apparently there's one guy online said Iran has been rebuilding their military, and I guess their Republican Guard is so well brainwashed they'll kill their own people to help the mullahs stay in power. And apparently they've got missiles. And so they're big enough that it won't be an easy thing to overturn this regime. So,
You know what?
any thoughts?
When people tell me that, all I say is, remember when what's his name? Remember when we ran up against Iraq, which was supposed to be the third largest army in the world?
Oh,
And
yeah.
after about 15
Saddam
minutes, they
Hussein.
left their tanks running backwards away from our army coming across the desert. And Baghdad Baba said, "The Americans are running in fear. We were killing them by the thousands." And then, meanwhile, all their guys are digging holes and trying not to get killed,
Yeah.
Yeah, Iran ain't no different than the rest of them. No. And
I
I
just-
think Trump, the whole reason Trump's doing this, I mean, I don't know, I don't think anything to do with the bomb. He's breaking up this alliance with Russia and China and Iran to break their power structure they're trying to develop. And doing that will further isolate Russia and China from the Middle East. And that's what he's trying to do.
Well, you got to look at the young people in Iran and their ability to see the outside world anymore. And there's young people automatically have a rebellious streak in them anyway.
Oh, yeah.
When you're young, you want to rebel against your parents, against against the establishment, if you want to call it, anybody that's in authority. And so the young people in Iran are looking on their television and they're seeing freedom on their phones or whatever it is, their devices, and they're able to look at the world and see what other people are, even Iranians that live here in the United States. And I think there's a wave that is going through those people, the youth of that nation, and they're not going to stand to be under that dictatorship any longer. And I think there's going to be a breaking point. I think there has to be. I just can't see how you can hold the people, suppress the people down for 50 years without somebody standing up and saying it. And we're seeing it in the rebellion, in the marches and the demonstrations that they're having in their country today. And even though they've killed a bunch of people to try to subdue it, I don't think they can put the fire out.
I thought they were going to break it a month ago when all the mess was going on. I thought that was going to be it. Trump just had to get some weapons into those people, and that might have ended it. Yeah. But our intelligence might have said it's going to be bloody. He's probably knowing Trump. He's trying to do this as painless to the people on the ground in Iran as possible. He's trying to come up with a way to get those people out of there and break their tie with, like I said, Russia and China as least painful possible for the citizens of Iran. Because he wants.
There's a purpose to Trump in office. There's a purpose to him being there, and everything that's really most of what they've thrown at him, it hasn't worked. I mean, 2 assassination attempts and him. Him going in and doing picking up that rogue leader over there in Venezuela. I mean, he's successful at what he's doing, and he's gained a great popularity. And I think that he's gonna. This will. I do think it's going to get better. Like you said, it's going to be the people that are rising up. But I think the situation over there is going to change, and Trump's going to be everybody knows. I think. They fear him because he's a deliberate man. He doesn't make idle threats, and he's going to figure it out and get it done. And I think that this is a leader that the world hasn't seen.
Well, it's a very dangerous situation there when you have that many ships and armaments surrounding the Middle East. I mean, you talk about a powder keg. I mean, anything that happens to those ships, if some rogue nation decides they're going to try to take out as many U.S. ships as they possibly can, I mean, given I think that can happen because of the U.S. Military might and their ability to withstand any attacks. But man, could it escalate very rapidly in that region. And now in the news this week of Pakistan and Afghanistan are back at swords points again and declaring war on each other again. So you got nuclear powered nations right there in that region, that are, it's a volatile place in the world to be assembled with so much power and military might. It's a little terrifying to think about what could erupt. And like I said last week in church is that, when who was it? The Francis, I can't think of his name now. It just slips my mind. That started World War II when he was shot there in Serbia and the Serbian War. Archduke Ferdinand was shot. One assassination on a president or a king there, the Archduke, and it led to people choosing sides, and it ended up in a war that cost, I forget now, I think it was 25 million lives or something like that worldwide, because everybody picked their own, side, and led to that bloody war. And this could very well escalate very quickly in that region, and it could get out of control, I guess, real quickly.
Yeah.
I think things could go bad. That's true.
It's Trump's trying to scare them out of their country.
I think so too.
Because after what happened to Maduro and the reports that came out of what happened to Maduro,
that's a good point.
And how fast he was just snatched out of there. There was they interviewed a guy, and it's all over the world, but I mean it got all over South America real fast. That we just showed up with a handful of helicopters, and just annihilated their men on the ground. They couldn't fight.
Yeah.
They couldn't do anything. We made them sick with these sonic energy weapons and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they were completely overwhelmed and outmatched. And their guy was snatched out from under their thumb, and they couldn't do a thing about it. And I think that's what Trump's trying to scare these. Well, people want to live. You know, they are nuts. But when it comes to push and shove, they want to live. They don't mind getting other people to commit suicide for them. But when it comes to them, they want to live.
I hope you're right.
A lot
One
of
man said, if they're true believers, that makes them more dangerous.
Yeah, but sometimes those guys at the top talk a good game just to keep power and money and, you know, all the kind of stuff, the debauchery flowing their way. But when it comes to push and shove, when it's their skin,
well, a lot of the wealthy people have transferred their money out of there too. You know,
yeah.
They're trying to get into offshore accounts because they're afraid of. And I mean, can you imagine being in that situation there where you're a leader of that country and you look at what's going on and what Trump has done in his past, and he means business, and then you see all this escalation of military power around your nation, you got to be shaking in your boots to some degree.
They're sitting in this country. 3/4 or more of their population hates them and wants them dead. They're trying to wrap their hands around that. Then they got the largest army on the planet surrounding their little country with every kind of armament and ship, and the toughest leader that's been in charge of this country in my lifetime, willing to go just annihilate them. They're not sleeping well. I'm telling you right now.
Well, and the second and third and fourth and fifth and 10th person in power might be thinking like they did in the days of Hitler. Some of the German high command wanted to kill Hitler because they knew what was going to be the aftermath of his reign once he went down, and so they were in agreement with trying to take him out. Maybe that will happen in Iran.
It's like we're trying to force it. You know, you get past the true believers, they'll surrender. And the moment things break enough that the people on the ground can get to those guys, if they can overrun the barracks or the compound that they're in because the army's busy and get to them, it's over. These people want them out. There's people, we're dealing with our military, we're dealing with Mossad. The minute things are lined up, Mossad is on the ground there. You know they are. And they're really, okay, guys, now it's time. And the people on the ground that have been trying to make this happen will spring into action. This is a big planned out thing, and it seems like it's about to break.
I agree.
I would say pray for the president and his strategy. Things can go wrong. I'm not saying they will, but they could. Well, life is full of strange twists. And I know the devil, and I even believe if America had some secret plan, there are people in our own government who would leak it to the enemy just to screw Trump over. They could care less about American troops. I even have a theory that a guy in the British government screwed Churchill in his first big military thing just because he hated him politically. Yeah. I know proving that's tricky business, about what somebody's motive would be. But I'm telling you, bad things can happen. And I know there are a lot of potential traitors in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I agree. And they've proven that fact in the last 5 years, 5, 6, 7 years, Mm-hmm. Yeah, we pray for the people of Iran, too, because, I've never been there, but I've listened to some of the programs that talked about it being one of the most beautiful places to visit. There's a lot of historical places that you could go visit, and was back in the 1970s and even in the early 80s. And now it's a place no one wants to go. And to have those people out from under that evil regime and out from underneath that evil dictatorship would be a remarkable feat. I think the people there would celebrate beyond belief if it ever does happen. I hope it will.
Yeah,
pray that Trump gets wise, that he gets strategic wisdom. Not that I even know what that is, because I'm not even sure what the best is. It's hard. It is hard to know because the Islamic world is tricky. And I believe they say, well, why didn't he talk to Congress first? You know, if he told Congress, it would leak so fast,
It would
make your head spin.
Half of Congress is
Mhm.
Muslim. They'd be all over that. A
Yeah.
large percent. I shouldn't say half. That's kind of
Can't
an
do that.
exaggeration. But there's
But-
enough of them in these committees that are Muslim. They would. I mean, the left is in league with them, hoping that when they both win, that one will take the other one out and take power over the rest of them. But that,
Mhm.
I don't know.
So it gets tricky. And the press is just as treacherous as some government bureaucrats, if not more so.
Oh yeah, of course.
Mhm.
I was talking to David Overstreet today. He's up in Greenland right now with his
What?
wife. Yep, and they're all having a good. Oh, he told me to tell the chat room he would have got on here to tell you you're all wrong, but it's 3:00 there right now, so he don't want to bother with it.
You mean about Greenland being America is going to get military control
Well,
of Greenland?
no, just to harass the chat room.
Oh,
But-
just to harass.
just to troll him. But he's telling me that the only news that gets there is anti-Trump news.
Anti-Trump.
There is no other options. They all get Trump is terrible, Trump's a pedophile, Trump this, Trump bad, Trump this, and that's all they get. They get nothing else. They get no truth, no nothing. It's
Does the
all
BBC
negative.
and Denmark control their media? Because both of them are
I have
very
I have no
anti-Trump.
idea.
BBC and Denmark.
Yeah.
It's that bad. I didn't realize it's that bad.
So they have they can't form an opinion based on on anything other than what they've got. So what do you do with that? You can't reason with people once they've been brainwashed. You can't send in anything else. They'll reject because they've been told by the smiling faces on the 6:00 news that everything about America and Trump is terrible.
You just do a flyover and drop hundreds of thousands of truth pamphlets.
Oh no.
Oh
We
well,
set up, what was
that's
that
really
woman's name in
unfortunate.
World War II? What was it? She was from Japan. She did radio broadcasts. What was-
Tokyo Rose.
Tokyo. So we should
Tokyo
set up
Rose,
a Tokyo,
yep.
our version of Tokyo Rose for Greenland. Send in our own propaganda, the conservative propaganda.
I told you the press was bad, and the Western press, including Western Europe, is bad. At least some of them are too. Well, I want to thank everybody. I thought we had a very interesting program tonight.
Well, yep. And I
Me too.
thank you, gentlemen. Everyone enjoy their Sabbath, the rest of their Sabbath. And we hope to see you again here next week. Any teases, or we just you'll get next week's program when you get it, or the title, or no?
Oh, we're thinking about the social media and their effect on relationship building between men and women, and the decrease in the formation of new families. It has to do with radical feminism and something called the red pill movement. I hope I haven't confused people. Don't worry about it too much if all that social media stuff hasn't grabbed you. We'll try to make it make sense.
We'll see what we can do. All right, gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you back here again next week.
Good night.
If I can
Good night.
find the intro, we'll see you. All right.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.